Hello, hello, everyone. I'm Suzanne Taylor-King, and we are here for another incredible episode of Unlock Your Way with STK. That's me, and my guest today is the incredible Todd Churches. He's an executive coach and an author of visual leadership. And I've been a fan of his for a couple years now, following him on LinkedIn, interacting and engaging. And welcome, Todd. It's really incredible to have you here.
Thank you, Susan. It's great to be with you. I couldn't remember how we originally met, but so I went back through my LinkedIn. I scrolled all the way to the beginning, and it was at a J.D. Gershbein gatherings early in the pandemic. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, I should keep track of where I originally connect with people. But one of the things that stood out for me was your talk about visual leadership. So I have a couple questions. I'm a visual learner myself. So things that look good and make sense really help advance my learning. So I'm intrigued to dive in how it helps with leadership.
Sure. So my TED Talk is called The Power of Visual Thinking. And the origin story is that years ago, when I worked in the entertainment industry out in LA, I worked for a theme park company, and we designed a theme park attraction to be installed in a theme park in China. And when we got there, it turned out none of them spoke English and none of us spoke Chinese. And we had to figure out a way to communicate. We ended up communicating visually. So I started sketching things out, and I'm not the greatest artist in the world, but I always say if you can play Pictionary and charades, you can communicate visually and non-verbally. And it was through sketching and drawing and pointing that we were able to get the job done. So like that light bulb moment was, hey, we don't just communicate verbally through words. And even though I was an English literature major and words are a big part of my life, but the power of pictures,
Yeah.
the value of creating mental movies in the minds of others to get people to see what you're saying, all of those things kind of became the centerpiece of my work and how I do my executive coaching. And I teach leadership at NYU in Columbia, and I do keynotes. I train people and teach people to communicate and to think more visually and to lead more visually.
I really, it stands out so much for me because about 10 years ago, I ran into somebody that did book summaries by drawing the key points of
Mm,
the book
yeah.
in, just like a one sheet. And I thought, oh, this is amazing. And this was, before book summary apps and all of those things. And I just thought, what a great way to summarize something. One, it's attractive to me to see a visual, but then also to be able to absorb knowledge that
Yeah.
way was really interesting. So, how did you discover that this could be really translated, from your position at a theme park? How did you discover that it could be translated into leadership and your coaching and consulting?
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is there are people who do for a living kind of what you're describing. It's called either graphic recording or visual note taking. And there are people who are amazing at it. The fact that they can, at a conference or at a workshop, they could stand there and while the speaker is speaking, they're sketching this out. So I have a few things that I've done, presentations I've given, where I brought in a graphic recorder and I looked at it afterwards to see how they visually represented because to take abstract, intangible concepts, but to represent them visually, you have to capitalize on imagery, on metaphor, on storytelling, right? So they need to be good listeners and kind of pluck those things out and say, all right, how am I going to translate that into some kind of visual? So in my book and in my talk, and in my classes, I talk about 4 ways to think and communicate more visually. So category 1 is using pictures, basically visual images and or props. So for example, I was talking to a client and he was avoiding talking about the main thing. And I said to him, what you're ignoring is the elephant in the room. We are not talking about the main thing there. Or one of my clients was talking about something, saying something that was very outdated. I'm like, you sound like a dinosaur right now speaking. So with him now, I just hold up the dinosaur. I don't even have to say that's a little outdated, but the dinosaur represents, you're going to go extinct. So even if you can't draw, you could still use props, you could still use pictures, you could still use visual language to communicate more effectively. So my 4 categories are visual imagery, mental models and frameworks, metaphor and analogy and storytelling, and bonus points for humor if and well appropriate, if and when appropriate. So that's the key thing. How do you get people to see what you're saying? As a leader, from a leadership perspective, if you think about the word vision, we talk about visionary leaders or having a leadership vision. What is that? It's a picture in your mind's eye that you could see, but how do you formulate that vision in a clear and compelling way? And then how do you communicate that vision so that other people can understand it? Because people are not mind readers. That's one of my mantras. And like when leaders say, well, you should have known, or why didn't you just do this? Well, whose fault was that? You probably didn't communicate exactly what it was that you wanted, right? So just because it's clear in your mind doesn't mean it's clear in other people's minds. So the power of visual leadership is when you leverage these visual thinking and visual communication techniques, people will have a clearer picture of what it is that you're aspiring to achieve and what your vision of the future is.
Yeah, it really, well, maybe it's sparking some curiosity right now, but I think, is there a resistance to, using props or using humor or using, these skills in a corporate, framework? Is there resistance to that?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. It depends on the situation. Like with creative people and creative organizations, they'll accept it immediately because that's the world they live in. That's how they think. But yeah, if you're talking about creativity and using visuals with CEOs or CFOs, you need to kind of do a little more selling them on the value and the power of it. So you kind of have to like ease into it. So for example, when I do a workshop for 20 CEOs and I start putting out big pieces of paper and colored markers, you can imagine the resistance, right? It's like, what is this, kindergarten? But I wrote an article for Inc. magazine called "Can You Draw What Your Company Does?" So the idea behind that exercise in that article is if you had to get up at a whiteboard or a flip chart and visually illustrate what your company does and how it's different from and better than the competition, how would you do that? So let's pretend it's Pictionary and you couldn't speak. What would you draw? Now, some people draw something more literal, like a process map or a storyboard or a mind map or a supply chain flow chart. And other people use metaphors and analogies to kind of like, we're kind of like this and we're more like this and less like this. So when at first you have the resistance, but once people have a colored marker in their hand, it triggers the right brain, playful side, the creative side that maybe they haven't even used since kindergarten. Then all of a sudden they want more time and more colors, right? And they're like, can we, so once you have, and real life example of the business value is one time these two CEOs who had known each other for like 15 years, until one of them mapped out his business, the other guy said, when you talked about some of your business challenges, I never really understood it. But now that you've mapped it out for me, I was like, I totally get it. I could see where the gaps are. I could see where the conflicts are. But again, just talking about it didn't illustrate it in a way that drawing did. So that was just a real life example that validated the value and power of sketching something out and saying, then you could look at something and you could say, yes, that's what I meant, or no, that's not what I meant at all. But you have a starting point. So the focus is not on just the words, but it's the idea, the concept, or whatever it is that you're talking about.
Yeah. Now, have you seen this have a ROI of improving culture and team dynamics? And like, I'm seeing all the things that this would improve upon.
Yeah, I mean, imagine having a team sketch something out together or build something together. And there are people who use Legos or people who use Tinker Toys or whatever, clay or props. But again, it triggers another side of your brain. Left brain thinkers are very logical, linear, numbers and facts based. But I always say that there's facts, figures, and feelings. People are motivated and influenced by feelings, not by facts and figures. So a CEO who gets up at a town hall and says, we're going to increase shareholder value by 10% over the next quarter, that doesn't exactly get people inspired and excited to get back to their desk and get to work, right? But if you paint a picture of a future of we're introducing a product that will provide a solution or save lives or make the world a better place, that's motivating and inspiring. So you need to, the facts and figures are, will describe how we're doing it and how we measure success. Peter Drucker said, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, right? So we need to have some kind of performance metrics in place to see where we're starting and where we're going to, but it's the feelings, it's the emotion, it's the vision. That's what excites people and it gets people motivated. So I train coaches in how to use visual coaching in their practices, and just getting teams to communicate more visually really helps to synergize and connect and bond in a way that words don't always do.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm feeling that, outside of even this realm, it could be beneficial not only in your personal relationships, it could be beneficial for friendships and networking and like so many things that I could see pulling this into, pulling
Yeah.
that visual aspect into. Um, which leads me to your passion and skill matrix that you talk about in one of your videos that was really intriguing for me because I instantly saw how it tied to speaking to your ideal client so well. Most of my clients are problem aware but solution unaware, so it
Mm-hmm.
falls right, what do we do without those 4 boxes, right?
Yeah.
But what I was intrigued with is that this visual learning piece, and you talked about what you love to do and what you're good at. Hence the reason I'm here talking to people because I love to do it.
Yeah.
Love to ask questions, love to dive deeper into the why of why somebody does what they do and how it benefits their clients. That inspires me and
Yeah.
hopefully inspires other people. But if you're good at something and bored with it, or you don't like doing it, how can we, just as well, entrepreneurs in general, but coaches, business owners, how can we get out of that box, that
Yeah.
lower right hand corner of your diagram? You're good at something, but it doesn't excite you.
Yeah.
It's not your passion. What do you
Yeah.
do in that situation?
Yeah, so my passion skill matrix that you're talking about, I teach it in my NYU and Columbia classes, and it's the centerpiece of my executive coaching work with my clients, because so many people, after filling out this matrix, realize that they're spending so much time in the wrong boxes, right? They're
Yeah.
spending time below the line. So just so you know, if anyone wants to go to toddchurches.com/passion, you can download that book chapter for free. So I just want to throw that out there for your viewers today. And then and there they could see the model and read that chapter from the book. But bottom line is the 4 boxes are your sweet spot is where what you love to do and what you're good at intersect. So that's the upper right. Upper left is you're good at it. You're not great at it yet, but you have an interest in or a passion for it. That's your growth zone. The lower right that you were asking about is your default zone. That's where you do it because you're good at it, but you don't necessarily love it, or you're not, maybe you used to, but not anymore. Doesn't motivate you. And then the lower left box is the failure zone. That's where you're doing things that you're not good at and you don't love to do, and you're pretty much stuck there, right? So even though it's a 4-box matrix, it's kind of like a cycle, because we start, even if we're not failing, we're not great at something. So we start in the failure zone, learn, and then inch our way up into the growth zone. Then we become good at something over time, get into the sweet spot. But then if we don't keep our morale up and keep our interest up, then we drop down into the default zone where we're just dialing it in, showing up, we're disengaged. So when I'm coaching clients, that's where they're spending a lot of their time. They get thrown things because, oh, you're good at that, you must love it. And it's like, I hate it, right? Or I don't. So a real life example, when I worked for a company years ago, because I was an English major and good at reading and writing, they would say, can you proofread this for me? Can you edit this document for me? And just because I was good at it and it came easy to me, that's not how I wanted to spend my day. That wasn't my job, but people would kind of come to you by default, hence the name of that box. So how do we get out of that box? We could find someone else who maybe has that task in their growth zone, and maybe we could partner with them and kind of mentor them, and then kind of slowly hand things off to them, right? So they're learning and growing. To them, it's something new and maybe more engaging and exciting. For you, you're getting it off your plate, so that frees up your time and your mental bandwidth so that you can work on more of your growth zone stuff and more of your sweet spot. So I think that's the key thing, because also a default zone can actually slip into the failure zone, because when you become so disengaged and you just dial it in and you're on autopilot, and your heart's not in it, then your
Mhm.
quality starts to decline, and then you find yourself stuck in the failure zone, which is much harder to get out of. So even though it's a
Yeah.
4-box matrix, it is in essence a cycle. So that's a great thing to think about: is what percentage of your time are you spending in each box, and how can you spend the most time above that line in your growth zone and your sweet spot.
Yeah, truly. And, when I think about that growth zone, I love the growth zone. That's my favorite.
Hmm.
I love to learn. I love to challenge myself with something new. And that actually becomes something that could slip right down into the failure zone, because if you're constantly learning something new, you never master
Yeah.
anything and become really good at it. So I love that you pointed out that it's not just a box, it's actually a circle cycle, and you can move between the boxes and you can go backwards, because anything in abundance really can be detrimental to you.
Yeah.
So too much of the thing you're good at might not put you in the right spot. So I love that
Yeah. Thank you.
distinction. Um, well, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your journey on LinkedIn, because you have a lot of followers, you have great content,
Thank you.
and where does it fit in your overall growth strategy for your business, for your coaching practice? I have a lot of coaches who follow me and would be interested to hearing that strategy.
Sure. I don't know if I have a strategy. It just kind of emerged. And
Mm,
before the pandemic, I had about 3 or 4 thousand LinkedIn connections. Now I'm up to about 15,000. Over the last 3 years, it's grown. So what was interesting is when I was trying to pitch my book to publishers, they said, "Oh, we love the concept, but you don't have a big enough platform." So they said no.
mm.
And it's like a chicken and the egg. When you have a book, you get a bigger platform. So it's kind of like again, which came first. And then
Yeah.
also because of the pandemic, because we were home and on our computers and on LinkedIn and on Zoom, that was another reason or way that I grew my followership and my
Mhm.
my network of connections. So, but I always talk about 4 Gs: be genuine, be generous, be grateful, and be gracious. So that's kind of like my leadership philosophy and my approach. And I try to train and coach other people in that. And the people who I get along with best tend to exemplify all 4 of those Gs.
How about that?
So I try to do that on LinkedIn. I try to be genuine when I post things. It's authentic. It's not superficial. And when people say, "Oh, I'm on LinkedIn, but I have someone, a media person who handles all my LinkedIn posts and my comments," that's not what it's for. That's not you. That's someone speaking on behalf of you. So
Mhm.
that's what I would say is, like, do your own posts, do your own comments, like and comment. That's how you're building relationships. That's being generous with your time and your thoughts, and adding value to other people. So that's, and being genuine, be generous, amplify other people. You could think about, I love the metaphor of, are you trying to get a bigger piece of the pie, or you're trying to expand the whole pie so that everyone gets a bigger piece, right? And that's
Mm.
my philosophy, is to expand the pie. So it doesn't diminish me, but it elevates me when I give shout outs to other people or promote. One of the things I'm known for, I read one business book a week, and I've been doing that for 25 years. So I just finished number 52 for this year, so I can check that off the list. I'll probably end up with 60 by the end of the year. There's still a month to go. Um,
Nice. Will you be publishing that list again?
I do every year. I publish but
Nice.
I publish as the books I read this year, if anyone cares. That's my annual end of year
Yeah.
blog post. But just, one of the things I do is I hold up people's books, or I write Amazon
Mhm.
reviews, because again, it's being genuine and generous, but also in a way it's a win-win, because it amplifies my brand as a thought leader in that space, right? So
Yes.
everything you do, if you think about, all right, how can I create a win-win that will benefit other people, then you could achieve all of those. And again, same thing with being gracious. You don't always have to be the smartest person in the room. You could compliment other people's work and say, "Oh, you disagree with my post. I see your point of view. That's an interesting take on it." So that's what I would say, is use social media as a way of building your brand, but also elevating and helping other people as well.
Beautiful. Perfect spot to wrap up and ask, how can everyone get in touch with you besides your website, connect with you on LinkedIn, follow you on LinkedIn, mention your URL again for everybody in that resource you talked about?
Sure. So yeah, just link in with me. Just say you saw me on Suzanne's show, so I know who you are. I'm happy to link in and follow each other and comment on posts. I have two websites. toddchurches.com is where you can find information on my TED Talk and my book. And then my company is called Big Blue Gumball, and that's where I do my management leadership training and executive coaching. So yeah, LinkedIn and those two websites are the best way to reach me. And again, to download that free book chapter on the passion skill matrix that we just talked about, just toddchurches.com/passion. If you put in the word passion, it'll open up the PDF of that book chapter.
Awesome. I'll put that in the show notes and make sure that goes out to my list and my YouTube channel as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Suzanne.
You're so welcome. Have an awesome weekend. And again, everybody, thank you for joining today. And please follow Todd and get connected here on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. Have an awesome weekend, and we'll see you soon.